What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Run Pure Sports Sabersim show. We are talking Sabersim right now, talking some MLB. We're not talking the early slate. The early slate stuff, it's going to lock soon. I already got all the early slate stuff done that I needed to over here at Run Pure. So if you want to sign up and get some main slate stuff, we'll have a lot of stuff for you in the Discord. So be sure to check it out. Steve Boynton, he crushed it on the playbook yesterday for the people. We had a guy win $50,000. So congrats to him. But Jordan, let's bring you in to talk some baseball. We got a earlier lock time as well. It's 6:40 p.m. Eastern, so a little bit earlier and only 5 games to deal with. Also, NBA streets are a little quiet tonight with only 1 basketball game. And then we got the NFL draft where all the draft experts are out and about on Twitter. So Jordan, how are you doing so far? And how's your MLB season looking?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Baseball's been off to a good start for me. We were talking before the show. I think it's probably my favorite DFS sport, not necessarily my favorite sport to watch. I don't know if it's anybody's favorite sport to watch, but definitely my best DFS sport. Off to kind of a hot start this season, so hopefully it keeps it going. I'll probably just end up having the variance hit me and come back down to earth a little bit here in the next couple weeks. But it's been going good. I like a 5-game slate every once in a while too. I think these can be kind of fun. It lets you get a little bit more contrarian, to take some stands here. Just ownership is going to get out of control on a couple of these guys, a couple of these stacks. So I think there's some opportunities to find some leverage there. Excited to get into it.
I agree on that. One of the things I do normally like is I like when it's a 5-game slate and the pitchers are like, you can't even pick between them, right? It's just like, it's absolutely brutal because then you could stack against the pitcher and that gets exciting. But I don't see us stacking against Garrett Cole. I don't see us stacking against Shane McClanahan. And it's not just them, right? There's good pitchers all around, which is going to cause, on the side that you talked about, the bats, it's going to cause the bats to be very heavily owned. I mean, you look, it's Cole, McClanahan, Cease, Heaney, Tyler Mahle, Kyle Gibson. And Kyle Gibson, yeah, we'll pick on him, but it's Detroit. Are we excited for Detroit? Not really. Joey Lucchesi. I mean, Joey Lucchesi was, absolutely dominant the other day. It was absolutely nuts. And, of course, he's going against Washington. And then it's Greinke against the Twins, which will be probably chalky. Trevor Williams against the Mets. I think that'll be a chalky spot. And then Wentz against Baltimore. So what I'm getting at is, like you said, the offenses are going to be very, very condensed. So one thing I do like about Sabersim is I love using Sabersim and kind of seeing when it likes good chalk. I think it does a good job of identifying what is good chalk and what is not good chalk at times. So that's definitely something that I'm excited to talk about with you here on the show. But before we kind of dive into all that, it sounds like you're big into baseball, one of the sports that you like a lot. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your process before we kind of dive in and start building out some lineups here?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think first of all, Sabersim was built originally for baseball. It was designed first as a baseball simulator. I think it's probably one of, if not the best sport to use a sim-based approach, because one, player ranges of outcomes, and we can pull that up here, are going to look very weird. There's not really any sport that looks anything like this here where, you're going to have, for hitters in particular, you've got some average projection, but that outcome is not very likely in the grand scheme of things here. The most common outcomes for basically every hitter in every baseball game ever is like scoring 0 or scoring less than 5 points. And then you have this really long tail of ceiling outcomes, which is, that's what you're actually looking for when you're trying to take these GPPs down. And then second, the correlations, right? Obviously, we have these very high correlations between hitters on the same team. You've got opportunities for guys to score points on the same play. When the offense is cooking, nobody's getting out, everybody's getting more at-bats. So when you take this simulation-based approach, you're simulating out these games and then building lineups from those sims here. One, you're taking into account those wide ranges of outcomes, and two, you're building those correlations in naturally. And it's just going to build very strong lineups right out of the gate. The other thing I love about Sabersim that really just helps me here is the way that we handle ownership. So we do a player variance adjusted ownership here. And this is new this season, actually, Mangone. I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this yet. AP and I have been talking about it the last couple times, but we now adjust the player ownership based on how high variance they are. So for Byron Buxton, chalkiest hitter on the slate right now that we're projecting here, we're projecting him to be about 23.5% owned. But based on our sims, we're saying that ownership actually counts as if he was almost 30% owned, just because he's a hitter in baseball, in a high variance sport. The field is assuming that he's going to more consistently get to his upside than he actually is. And it's going to lead more likely. I mean, I don't know exactly what's going to happen when we run these builds, but for these high adjusted owned guys, the Twins, the Mets, Aaron Judge maybe as a one-off here, those are guys that are going to be a little bit more likely to be faded here. If we look at the pitchers, we look at the top adjusted owned, it's going to be actually pretty close to their original projection, which is saying, you know, their ownership projection is about appropriate based on that player's variance here. The chalk's a little bit more reliable. So really those kind of things combined, right? Obviously we want to stack up, take advantage of that correlation. I get pretty aggressive with how I end up spreading out and diversifying. And then I'm pretty comfortable taking stands and fading some of the chalk and getting some of those bats with upside at lower ownership. And that's really my process. That's worked pretty well for me for the last couple of years. It's off to a good start this year. I'll show that some of that here as we go along. But I think Sabersim just ends up doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me.
Yeah, I mean, no, the adjusted ownership thing is great. And one thing I think it does, at least I can definitely notice by just looking at it for today's slate, is like, yeah, Garrett Cole at 50%, but like, I don't know. I think he ends up coming higher, right? It adjusts some of the guys that like, I think are going to be chalkier that like it needs adjustments on sometimes. And again, it's, what time is it at, right? It's 12:07 Eastern. Like, but I think it makes those adjustments already for you now, which is kind of nice. So, I definitely like it. I think it's a good one. And there's times like one guy that probably is always high in the adjusted ownership category is Aaron Judge, right? Like it's like there's some slates I see Aaron Judge's ownership, and I'm like, the guy's not going to be 3% or something absurd. Like yes, no one's playing Yankees, but you know what? If you got salary left over, Aaron Judge is being plugged in as an outfield one-off. It's just the truth. So I do like that it's adjusting that. I think that's pretty good there. But overall, if you haven't signed up over here at Run Pure Sports, we have a partnership with Sabersim. You get to use this optimizer. And let me tell you, using an optimizer is so key in this industry. Yes, there are some people that can hand build. And I used to hand build all the time. I love to hand build. Sometimes I still hand build occasionally. But at the end of the day, I like to use an optimizer the most. I think it's important. Even when doing single entry and 3-max kind of stuff, you handpicking your lineups, not a bad way to go about it. For sure. So that's definitely something that I like doing. Honestly, you could just use it for research purposes. Sometimes I go into Sabersim, I run some stuff, and I like to see what kind of teams are popping up. What is it, a 5-2-1, right? Is it a 5-3? Maybe I'm surprised that like the chalk stack is being pushed a little harder, and I realize maybe I should eat the chalk there and get different with my pitchers or get different within the stack. Those are just things that I like to look at. So Jordan, I guess before we dive into build lineups, how do you use the optimizer in some like unique ways like that, like just research purposes? Because I think you kind of do a little bit of that too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite things that I've done here for a long time is I will just run a build, and here actually we'll go ahead and show this. I'll turn correlation off, and I'll build it like a very high sim diversity setting. Set the pool size as big as it can go, so that's 1,500 in this case, and we'll just build some lineups here. And what you're basically doing, we call this a research build over on the Sabersim YouTube channel. But basically what you're kind of doing here is you're simulating the slate 1,500 times. You're basically just telling Sabersim, hey, build the best lineup you can for a given way that the slate could play out. And I will use this. I will compare how often players show up in the lineups in this 1,500 to their ownership projection. And that'll start to give me a sense of like, maybe where do I want to take some stance? So let me give you an example here. We'll make 2 adjustments here just so I can see this. So if we start, I really like this for batters in particular. So if we look at batters and then use this leverage column, which is going to be exposure minus ownership, Sabersim will kind of start to help us find some stance. So we look at these guys, it is all Twins, maybe a little bit of Baltimore showing up here. But if we look at these Twins guys here, Jose Miranda showing up in 5% of our slate simulations, going to be owned 17% of the time. Byron Buxton showing up in 13% of our slate simulations, being owned 24% of the time here. So I will run this kind of build and just go start to look and see who's showing up less often than they're going to be owned. Is that a team? Is that a stack I want to fade? You can do this the other way too. If we look at positive leverage here, sometimes this can put you onto a sneaky stack, right? Even some of the teams that you were mentioning right when we got started here. Tampa Bay shows up. Also Detroit, Washington, Kansas City here, not necessarily teams that, maybe you want to be the majority of your portfolio or your biggest stack on a slate like this. But if you're looking maybe, hey, where do I want to take a stand on a lower owned stack? Where's a team that has some upside that the field's not really appreciating? You can run these builds here. Again, it's basically just 0-9, and I build as many lineups as I can, and I play with this leverage column here. You can do the same thing for pitchers. And this has been a big part of my process for a long time, especially as a research tool, like you mentioned here, just to get an idea. Garrett Cole's an interesting one, right? Highest owned pitcher on the slate. We actually think, just like you said, maybe the field's actually under owning him a little bit at 50%, showing up as optimal about 54% of the time there. So it can be very useful here for just research purposes, getting an idea of what the slate looks like.
Yeah, on these shorter slates, especially ones like I said, where the pitching is just like really condensed with some good ones and then like just like a couple bad ones. What ends up happening, like I said before, the bats, everyone's gonna go to the same ones. And like before the show started, Jordan, I basically said, "Oh, look, the Twins are chalk." Like, yay! Like, I mean, it's just they're just an easy fade for me. I mean, it's just at least we haven't ran anything with all the correlation. I'd be curious to see. From my eyes, right, and looking at stuff, I just think the Twins become a very easy fade. I'm not saying let's fade them yet. Let's run stuff like you normally like to do, kind of dive in and see what's kind of popping out there. But for me, I definitely think they're going to be the fade. I don't want to fade the pitching that much. I think the Twins are going to just be too chalky for my liking. Also, when you think about it, like Zach Greinke, like, and this is just like, sports dog. This isn't like Sims, everything. Zach Greinke's one of those guys, like, I don't know. Sometimes these like old vets just find a way, right? Like, I don't know. You can't explain it. They're still in the league for a reason, and they just do. It's weird, but it seems like one of those spots. I'll let everyone else try and pick on Zach Greinke, and I'll pick on other spots, right? I mean, Washington has a really bad bullpen, so if you can't get to whoever the Washington pitcher is today, who's their pitcher? It's not anyone I think special. It's
for Washington, Trevor Williams. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Trevor Williams. Yeah, I'm not worried at all about Trevor Williams. But I don't even know. He's not an older guy. He did play for the Mets recently, so I don't know. Who knows if the revenge factors there, as people like to say. But yeah, I just think overall I would rather take the Mets chalk if I had to pick over the Twins chalk. That would just be my preference. But yeah, I guess let's run some stuff and see what happens. Maybe we'll get some surprise pitchers that pop up or some surprise bats. Again, it's a 5-game slate. It seems like one that's not going to be super easy. So I'm curious to see what happens with the simulations here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think, this is the right way to use the tool, right? A lot of times people, first couple builds on Sabersim, they get to that home screen and then ask, okay, so now what do I do? And really the correct answer to that is run a build, right? See what you're getting, see what the correlations and the sims are giving you here. You can also make a lot of edits post-build here, adjust exposures, clean up your stacks a little bit. We're building 1,500 lineups. I only have a set of 20 here that I'm working from. So you have a lot of flexibility here. This is the best way to get started. A lot of times I think people rush into making a bunch of changes on that home screen when you don't really need to right off the bat. So
here's one question for you. Actually, I'd be curious to get your perspective on, because I know eliminating guys is like something that, like, for instance, if I know I'm just not playing an offense, like, do you just eliminate the offense from the start?
That's totally fine. Yeah, I think, and I would still recommend running that first build just to see. But yeah, it's definitely fine to, once you've run one, research the slate a little bit, make some changes. I think the way I typically recommend it here is, put your deal breakers in on the home screen. Like if you want 100% of your lineups to have something or 0% of your lineups to have something, put it in ahead of time, right? If you're like, we could fade the Twins, right? If we just want to X them out. Actually, what we can do here is do it this way so we don't, maybe we do want to play Melee here.
Yeah, we want to have Melee in there for sure. It's Melee bats.
Yeah, so we can go in and we can fade them here just like this. And then that's going to give us a little bit of a better pool. But I think, or go ahead.
One thing I'll just say I like to do, and I'm not saying that I would do this. You could do it on this one, but like, for instance, like I think the Miami Marlins are a good example. You don't really you don't just want to X Miami. Like sometimes Jazz Chisholm is he's a really good one-off option. And so what I'll do sometimes is I'll X every single person but him. That way I don't get, because I like 5-2-1s a lot. And I'm fine with him in the one-off, but I don't want like a 2-man with like Nick Fortes, right? Like it's not super appealing. It always depends on the team and the slate. but there's sometimes spots where it's like that. And you could do this with the Twins in a way too, right? You could leave it where Buxton is there as a one-off. I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but I'm just saying those are things you can do, just like you're building right now. Say, hey, I'm okay with leaving these guys in the pool as one-offs because, hey, at the end of the day, like, could the Twins end up losing like 5-2 and one of these guys hits a home run? Of course. Like, they are in a good spot. At least one thing I know I've started doing a little bit more is instead of just Xing the team or ignoring the team that's the chalkiest team on the slate, I won't X them out as like a mini stack or as a one-man stack. Like the other day, I know the Braves were like very highly owned. Like they were a team that felt like everyone was on. And the Braves did well. But you know what? The Braves weren't the 5-man stack that won that day. They were the 3-man stack that ended up winning. It's like, I think that's kind of something I've made an adjustment in baseball is like, listen, I don't just have to fade the chalk offense, but I can find ways to just be different how I'm using the chalk offense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of ways you can do that in Sabersim too. So, I mean, one thing I've got pulled up here is we basically X'd out everybody but the 1 through 4 for the Twins, or the expected 1 through 4 here. And then I'm going to set a rule and say, don't use any of these guys together. So they're all viable one-offs here. The builder can use any of these guys here as a one-off into a lineup, but it's not going to stack them. If you wanted to make that a little bit bigger, maybe you're okay them being like a more mini stack. You could do no more than 2. Or you could even start adding in some of these other guys back into the pool and then add them to your rule here. So you can get kind of creative there with how you're handling certain teams using just the player pool and a grouping rule here to group those guys out.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to go about it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can build lineups. And again, like you said before, that clean first run is good. Why don't we go back to the clean first run that you did and kind of see just what it's doing? Because again, I think we think the Twins are going to be the fade, at least for me, but I'm curious to see what it's all looking like. So I've definitely seen a lot of Yankees being pushed.
Yes.
So that's interesting. What are the 5-mans? Let's see, like, obviously Yankees are all over the place. Oh, wow. So they're just everything.
So, yeah. So this is a good opportunity here, right? So 95% Yankees 5 stacks here, right? It looks like Sabersim loves Yankee stacks, and it does, right? I mean, 25%.
Is that with or without the Twins? Which one was that? Was that with?
That is, the Twins are in this pool here. Okay. So we didn't get a ton of them. We got 5% in our 1,500 here, none in our top 20. One of the things that you can do here, and this is actually probably one of my favorite tools, is if this looks too concentrated for you, which it does look too concentrated for me, I'm good with playing a lower owned Yankee stack, but this is a lot, is start to just increase this min uniques player here, and it will start to diversify your pool. So I'm going to set that 4, just kind of see what the impact of that is. And we'll see as this goes up here, it's going to start to smooth out our exposures a little bit more and get some exposure there. We really do seem to like the Yankees, but you can get pretty aggressive with min uniques here, not even getting that far into your pool, and it will start to smooth things out. We see some Tampa Bay, some Washington, some Detroit. Still no Twins. Sabersim is definitely on the same side here as we are with that Twins fade. Not showing up as none of our lineups, even with 6 min uniques in our top 20 here.
Okay, wow. Yeah, so that's interesting. Definitely seems like the Yankees are the team that's going to be pounded on there a little bit. I wonder if the roof is open in Texas or if it's accounting for that. I don't know, or it's just maybe Heaney gets hit hard. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting because it's only 7.5 total, which that's low on this slate. So yeah. One thing I actually wanted to ask you, this is something that I like, but it's not that it can sometimes be a little tedious. So maybe you have the answer to make it easier on me. Is there a way to make it where like I set like a max of how many, like let's say for hitters, I want a max of like I don't want any hitter above 50%. Isn't there a way to do that? I'm blanking on the way. Maybe it's because it's the start of the baseball season, but isn't there a way to do that?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple different ways you could do that. I think
I don't want to do it the way where I have to go through and do every single player. That's exhausting. That's what I'm saying. Like the quick hitting way.
There's not like a super quick way. I mean, I will say most of the time, because lineups are so correlated, if you just start setting a hitter to 50, it's going to like adjust pretty quickly here and get everybody down to under 50 really fast in a build. The easiest way, like if you really wanted to do this, and there's not an easier way at the moment, would be to download the player projection file, filter out pitchers, and then set a max exposure in the file to everybody else to 50% and re-upload that. It's a little tedious.
I think the other way probably is best. But I was just curious because like I do like to like I think one thing I've noticed when I build baseball teams, I noticed it once this year already. Like sometimes I'll like have a stack and I'm just looking at the stack and I'm like, I remember it was the Cardinals. It was the day the Cardinals were very chalky. And the whole thing I wanted to do that day was I wanted to make sure, well, when I'm playing my Cardinals, I do want a really nice mixture, right? I don't just want to have 100% Goldschmidt, 100% Tommy Edman, Carlson, all those guys. And then like the guys that are in like the 7 and 8 hole, I have like 5%, right? I kind of want to be a little overweight on those guys that are at the bottom of the order. So then I had to go in and kind of set some rules to make it happen, which ended up, I found a way, but I was wondering if there's just like a quick way, because that is definitely one way that it'll definitely do that. If you're pounding a lot of Cardinals on teams, you say, well, max of, 60% Paul Goldschmidt. Well, then of course if you're playing a bunch of 5-man, it's going to put some other guys in the lineup. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and the min uniques will bring your exposures down really fast. Like if you crank this here, instantly. Well, when we were at like 6 here, it's bringing your hitters down pretty fast. 45 now is our highest on hitter, and this will have the effect that you're kind of looking for, right? 70% Yankee stacks, but our highest on hitter here is just Rizzo at 45%, which means we know we're stacking up the Yankees in this case, like every which way here. I really like to use this. I like to spread out too. I would not want to see 100% exposure in 20 lineups to any hitter. This is the way I tend to go about it here too. So one other thing worth looking at, I always like to take a look at the stack types as well, and just see what kinds of stacks I'm getting. 5 3s, 5 2s, 1 just 5 with 3 1-off stack. These are kind of ones that I typically tend to be a little bit cautious of, even on a 5-game slate. You can see there's not a lot of them in our 1500. A lot of times these are the kinds of stacks that I end up doing a little bit of cleanup here and just Xing them out, just because there's probably better 5 2s, 5 3s sitting in the pool that I'd rather use there.
Yeah, no, I think those are great ways to kind of mess with it. So I guess let's do this. Let's go back and let's make sure the Twins and the rules aren't in there, and that's all good. Now let's eliminate the Yankees, because the Yankees are clearly the team that Sabersim likes. I'm not saying that the field likes them, but I just want to see, hey, when we eliminate the Yankees from the pool, what's Sabersim's second favorite one? For sure, by far, right? Like it was pushing some other offenses, but I kind of like to eliminate it completely. That way you can really get an idea of which one it's pushing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is another good way to use it for research, right? Like if you run that first build, okay, Sabersim likes Yankees, especially maybe you're just building like 3 lineups, and maybe you're, okay, I'm going to play a Yankee stack in one of them, but what's the next best team up? Where do I go after that? This is a good way to do that. Start looking at what some of these other stacks can look like here. So give this
and it might put you onto a team that you're not expecting. And another thing that you might do, and again, kind of research purpose wise, which I kind of like, is I'll look at the teams and I just might notice like a 2-man stack is being like pushed harder, or a 3-man, and I don't understand why. And then as I look at the teams, I kind of understand why. And I might be like, oh, well, it's like, as I kind of look at the position, I might be like, oh, well, second base is just so bad, right? Like, look at the pool I have left. And it's like, that's why it's pushing like Ozzy Albies and Brave stack so much, because he's just projected so well. We have the money and the position is just absolutely atrocious. So that's something that I like to look at. It helps me learn the slate and understand how I want to go about it, for sure. So I see a lot of more 5-2s than the 5-3s from before. So that's kind of interesting. What's the top stack here? Oh, Tampa Bay. Okay, so it's definitely a little more spread out now.
Yes, definitely a little more spread out, and getting pretty contrarian, like spreading out to a bunch of these teams that aren't really the Twins or the Mets. The Mets are actually showing up here now, so that is a useful data point here. But yeah, the Rays here against Cease, the Royals against Kyle Gibson, right? Yeah. Washington, the Mets do start to pop up there. Baltimore, so definitely a lot more spread out here. Still a heavy fade on the Twin side there, but definitely quite a bit more spread out. So I like the way that this is looking here. I think, to me, this is a sign that I would want to be somewhat spread out on this slate overall. We might actually even be a little high on the Yankees, just to be totally honest. I think that might be a team that I would maybe consider just taking a tad down on the team total and rebuilding, or just making an effort to spread out here. Because I think if the Twins and the Mets are going to end up soaking up a ton of ownership here, I think this is the right way to play the slate, is to just get really spread out on all these other teams that people are ignoring.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? Let's go and lower the Yankees thing down. Show the people this tool because I think this tool is great for baseball. So I think it's worth kind of talking about here.
Yeah, so I'm going to reset it here so we can put those guys back in. And what I'm going to do is just bump Yankees down. Let's do a half run and see what impact that has there. I like to kind of start with half run increments when I'm making a stand with one of these team totals here. We'll pull this up. What this is going to do is it's going to go into the Sims. It's going to adjust every player playing in the game. So, the Yankees order and also the Rangers pitcher here, and adjust them to what their average projection is when their average team total is 4. So all these guys are going to get knocked down a little bit. We look at Heaney's going to get a little bit of a bump here. Looks like almost 1.5 points of a bump here. So it can be really useful if you just want to take a stand on a team as a whole, because it'll have that correlated impact there as well. One other thing that was jumping out to me, I do just want to mention this here. I think we are also a little bit low on Shane McClanahan. I was looking at the pitchers just overall, and just looks a little bit low here at first glance to me. I think we're low on a strikeout prop as well. Salary looks like a bit of a mismatch. I think I'm going to give him a pretty sizable bump there, just because I want to see if we can get him into some lineups. That's another guy that it seemed like we were fading almost completely in those first builds. So I think we run another one.
Yeah, let's run it. We'll look at it. If you guys haven't signed up, I know Run Pure Sports, you can use code Mangone15, get you 15% off. So if you want that, great. If you want to pay the full price, go for that too. But get the 15% off. It makes sense. But and then obviously you can use Sabersim, get that add-on. It's definitely a great tool you should be using. And also, if you guys can hit that like for us, we'd appreciate it over here at Run Pure Sports. We got tons of content for you today. Don't you worry. We got a bunch of shows. I will be on the MLB show with JT Hayes. I'll be on with Titletown. We're talking at 4:45, so I'll be talking about this slate. We got the NBA rundown. That'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern. They'll be talking about the games. And, man, Jordan, I don't know how much basketball you've been watching, but did you?
It's been amazing.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And the shot last night by Jimmy Butler. Can we take a break for a second from baseball, talk about how on earth do they make that pass and do you make that shot? It was absolutely incredible, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. He's playing out of his mind. The Heat-Knicks series is going to be a dogfight. I am so excited for that. Just like the two toughest teams in the playoffs. I am very excited for that series. I wasn't very interested in that Knicks-Cavs series in the first round, probably the one I was watching the least, but now we've got these two teams in the second round. That is probably the series I'm most excited to watch in the second round so far.
Yeah, we get Tom Thibodeau versus Jimmy Butler, so that old little reunion there. It's going to be a really fun series. So I'm excited for that. I'm also a Boston Celtics fan, so it's got a little cleaner path now. So I'm excited about that. That should be good for them. Hopefully they get the job done tonight. And then the West is interesting too. So a lot of fun. Excited for some more NBA playoffs to come. But let's keep diving into some MLB here. And what do we see with the McClanahan adjustments, Jordan?
We see a lot. Maybe went a little overboard there. I mean, I don't think 33% of the pool is too much. I do like to use, again, when I'm seeing a ton of exposure to a player, I like to use this pool exposure to give me an idea of okay, how much does Sabersim really like this guy, right? Right now it's saying, of your top 20, he's in 100%, but he's showing up in about 34% of the pool. Again, that's something that will cool off a little bit if you use mid-uniques or just cap it, right? I mean, we could say, let's do 75% instead and bring that down a little bit. But we are getting a lot of Shane. I'm not opposed to that. I kind of want a lot of Shane in my lineups here. It's a guy that I think in general we can be a little bit low on, so I'm fine with the projection adjustment there. Still a lot of Yankees showing up too here. That's a half run increment down. A lot of times to me, when you start making adjustments and they're still really popping, that is a sign where a lot of times I'm like, okay, I'm going to play some Yankees bats tonight, because if we're basically saying, okay, what if the Yankees were a whole half run lower in the Sims? Do we still like them? The answer is a pretty strong yes there. That's a team I want to get some exposure to. So I still want to spread out. I might cap them. Maybe they're my highest owned stack, but maybe I'm max 40% there. But it's a team I'm going to get some exposure to on the slate here. And I think it's a good sign in general. I think a lot of times, people go in, knock a team down a half run, run another build, and it's like, why am I still getting this team? If you don't want them, just X them. If you drop them by a half run and you're still getting them, it's probably a good sign that maybe you should play that team.
Yeah, and again, it's the Yankees are good. You want to like them, but it's early, right? It's still 12:30. Adjustments do get made.
Yes,
projections to some degree.
Absolutely.
It doesn't get crazy, but there can be changes in the starting lineups. Also, it is a Thursday, and that's a change for a series. And sometimes coaches give players off, games off. And for instance, let's say Aaron Judge randomly sat today. I'm pretty sure some of the Yankee stuff would adjust a little bit. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, there could be adjustments there. Be sure to rerun some stuff later in Sabersim. I know I'll be doing it before the show at 4:45 Eastern, so that'll be some good stuff there. But yeah, Jordan. So what? Let's look at the 5 and 2 man stacks, I guess, a little bit. So 5 man wise, get a lot of Yankees. How do you handle like the mini stacks? Like, what's some stuff that you look at there with the 3 and 2 mans?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. To be completely honest, I would say I don't really like spend a lot of time going and looking for specific 2 and 3 man stacks to dig up and go get. A lot of times I end up staying in this all tab here, and I kind of let the chips fall where they may with some of these teams. So, like, let's say I did want to get, like, Baltimore was a team that jumped out to me in that initial build here. Maybe a team I want to get a little bit of exposure to. So if I wanted to,
Jordan, you get 30%, right, in the stat. So it's like it's not like they're a bad play when you run everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if my research was saying, hey, let's get some Baltimore in my pool, which again, it's a team I kind of like here today, I might go and bump them up to maybe match the pool exposure. So not my top stack, but kind of middle of the road. And then that's when I might go in here and look and see, okay, when I tell Sabersim I want 30%, how does Sabersim then allocate that across my different stack sizes here? And that can be useful, right? I mean, we're getting some Baltimore 5 stacks. So to me, that's saying, yeah, I mean, there's legitimate upside here. We're kind of getting an even spread of Baltimore across the different stack sizes. Sometimes you might take a team like, maybe we say we want to play both sides of this here and get a little bit of White Sox. Like maybe we do, let's just, for fun here, let's set them to 30% too. Sometimes you'll do that and you'll see that like Sabersim throws in 100% 2 stacks or 3 stacks of that team. And it's Sabersim is basically saying like, yeah, okay, if you want some exposure. So this is actually a good example. We bumped up the exposure of the White Sox. We're getting no 5 stacks and we're getting no 4 stacks of that team. So to me, it means, like, yeah, there's some mini stack upside here, right? There's a couple guys in the lineup. There's sims where those guys go off, but it's unlikely that they're going to be the 5 stack, at least according to Sabersim here. That's only happening 1% of the time in our pool here. So that I'm not going to go and force the 5 stacks in. I just want to, if I want exposure to a team, a lot of times I let the tool kind of decide what types of stacks I'm going to get with them.
No, so that's useful. Actually, one thing I noticed that you did that I have issues with sometimes. I don't always run like 1,500 lineups. Like I run less than that. And then sometimes this is what'll happen. When I run the teams and I go through and do it, and I try to add in like a 5-man, like, 10% 5-man Baltimore stacks or something, it just won't work, or it'll like have issues. The way you did it, I think through the all tab, rather than on like the stacks like I do, is probably better. And I think it's just because it's naturally, as long as you see how many you have in your pool size. Like for instance, I would say you probably, I don't know if I see an example there, but like, let's say the Mets, there was only like 1% of them and you wanted to force in like 15%. Well, like obviously it's going to be harder to put it in there, but because you only have 20 lineups going into 1,500, it's a little bit easier because it has enough lineups to pull from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more lineups we're asking for here and the fewer lineups in our pool, the harder it's going to be to get what we're looking for. So, I mean, a couple notes on that. One, especially for baseball, like for main slates, I would just build 1,500. Like it's so fast and it will just make it way more flexible for you to get the lineups you're looking for.
Yeah.
But two, like let's say we wanted to take a big stand and there was something we couldn't get, right? Like maybe we want specifically White Sox stacks, 5 stacks, and we go in here and we set this. Let's do even more. Let's say 100% White Sox 5 stacks. Right? Eventually it's going to freeze up on us and it's going to say we can't get there. It's going to give you as many as it can. It's going to lock up. That's a good sign then to go back to the home screen, then do something like this again, right? Let's do another team total bump and bring the White Sox up. And the next time we run it, we'll have more White Sox 5 stacks to work with, and we'll be able to get a little bit closer to what we're trying to do there. So I like building with 1,500 most of the time here. And if it's not doing what you want it to do in the build screen, that's the right time to go back and make some adjustments here, make some changes. Another thing you could do is like maybe we were getting we were getting a lot of Rays, right? So maybe if we want to be more on the White Sox side of that game, maybe we go in and start removing some Rays players too, just so they're not taking up spots in that lineup pool there.
Yeah, and I mentioned that like just because like I know some people that use Sabersim and they run into these technical issues, right? And it's like
Absolutely.
they're confused at what's going on. It can be frustrating, right? But like anything in life, right? Practice makes perfect, and if you got to dig into the opto in practice. I think it's super important. Like for instance, the early slate, it already locked, like or it's just locking now. Go if you want, go through and like experiment with what you would have done this morning and then run it. And then obviously you have some results. And I know results aren't anything, but it helps us sleep at night and figure things out and be like, oh, was this a good idea? Was this a bad idea? Or at least kind of get you start going in the right direction a little bit. So yeah, maybe practice the early slate a little bit, see what it would have done, see if it makes sense. And then play the late slate later. Again, this isn't like a store. We're not open from 9 to 5, right? It's 24/7. You can go into Sabersim whenever you want and mess around with it. It's a great tool, and you can learn a lot while trying to use it. What's some of the pitching stuff you noticed? I guess let's bring McClanahan down a little bit from this number too, because I think you said you gave him an aggressive one. So we'll put him back down. Why don't we run it again and see what it's doing pitching wise, I guess, for us.
Yeah, let me reset the let's reset the White Sox as well and rerun this. Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, because again, I think we've talked a lot about the bats, but like, how do you handle it pitching wise? Because I think the consensus is that for the most part, we want to eat the chalk when it comes to pitching more than hitting naturally, especially when it's like a Garrett Cole. What are some things that you notice with pitching and how you handle it? Because again, it's hard to get like a 5% pitcher that like you absolutely love.
Yeah. So a lot of times with pitchers, for me, I am more interested, rather than looking for the low-owned guy that people aren't playing that I want to get exposure to. A lot of times I'll look for kind of the worst higher-owned pitcher and take an intentional stand against them there.
Yeah.
So couple things. One thing that can be useful here is that research build we did at the start here. A lot of times I will use this for pitchers and just see if anybody's really jumping out to me. So let's look at the negative leverage for pitchers here. And Shane's going to jump out here because we ran this one on the original projection, which I personally think is a little bit too low. A lot of times my favorite targets are like the Lucchesi types here, where you're talking about a low salary guy that's maybe a little bit underpriced, maybe not the most talented pitcher in the world. The chalky SP2 is kind of the guy a lot of times I like to pick on. And Sabersim's picking up on that as well, right? 27% owned, optimal about 20% of the time. That's a guy that a lot of times I will, and it seems like most slates end up having a player like this. Sometimes you get the like double ace slate, which we kind of have tonight, or you just get all the pitchers suck and everybody's just playing kind of value bad pitchers. But if it's Lucchesi tonight, I might go in and look here and see, what exposure are we getting there? So we're fading already. Just the default Sabersim here. Actually, our biggest leverage stand on the pitchers here is against Lucchesi here, which I like. But I might go in and just make sure that I'm also getting exposure to the opposing bats. So I want Washington here if I'm already going to take that stand. Oh, you know what? I think I ran this with the White Sox.
Oh, okay.
I ran them. Yeah. So let's just jump back a build. That's fine. We got plenty of builds to work with here. So I'll probably go in and make sure that I'm getting some exposure to White Sox stacks, which let me reset this here. There we go. Okay. So I am getting some exposure, but this is now a team that I'm particularly going to target because I want my portfolio of lineups, all the lineups I'm playing in this contest, to tell a little bit of a story of how I think the slate's going to go out. And if I think that it's worth fading Lucchesi on one side, I want also some Washington stacks. So we're getting some. I don't know if I need to go more than 30%, but that's a lot of times how I end up handling the pitchers. I like to pick on those chalky, lower salary SP2 type guys.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Definitely some good stuff there from you, for sure. If you guys could please hit that like, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports. Jordan, anything else you want to show the people here with the slate? I mean, yeah, it's a short slate, so it might be a little quicker because it's only 6 games. But what else you got here?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I guess we talked about the stack types too. That's obviously a big part here. I do like to. It's probably the first thing I do, right? A lot of times when I run a build, actually, this is a good example. I kind of do this back to front. Game stacks don't matter a ton. I don't think in baseball. I think maybe if you really want to look at them, you can. But a lot of times I start with my stack types, right? Do these look the way I want them to look? And right now they do. I got no problem with this, but I might, trim up some of those 3 stacks, the 4 stacks and so on. Then I'll go to the team stacks, right? I don't care as much about individual hitters to start with. I'll look at the stacks first, right? So might be a couple things I'm looking at. This might be an opportunity where I bring down some exposure here. If one looks a little high, I might make sure that I have, Washington showing up if I'm deciding that's kind of a leverage spot. And then I'll get all the way over to the players here and then start looking at individual players. And that back to front system, I think, works pretty good in baseball because it's like the biggest macro level first. What stack do you have? Then a little bit smaller, what team stack do you have? Then a lot smaller, what players do you have? So I think that's a good way of starting to look at your lineup pool here. And then I'll mention it one more time because it's my favorite feature here. I use it every single slate. I love the min uniques. If you run a build and it looks too concentrated, crank up the min uniques. You can get very diversified with Sabersim very, very easily with that quickly there, especially if you don't have a stand to take, right? Like if you're looking at the slate and you're like, I don't know really what I want to do. Things look kind of good. I'm just maybe a little bit too concentrated. This will just diversify you while also still letting you leverage against ownership and things like that. So one of my favorites there.
I definitely like that a lot. I think that's pretty good. I love that min uniques thing. One more thing I'll mention that I don't see myself doing this often, but an idea I had with when you talked about the game stack stuff, like the only time I think I'd ever be like, yeah, let me force in a game stack would be like if it's like a Wrigley win game and I know no one's on like one side, but they're on like everyone's on Chicago. And it's like, how could I make the Chicago stack different? Well, if I'm already betting on that angle, why not just throw in 20% and then grab that other team that no one's on?
Yep.
So that's one way I would maybe do it. And maybe I'd do it with like Cincinnati when it's hot out. But again, I think it'd more so be on a slate where like I know no one's on that other side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And that is a situation where you're actually going to have a little bit of positive correlation between those opposing teams because if the weather's perfect and especially if the wind, a lot of times we get that like wind report and it's kind of blowing right to left at Wrigley, but then the game starts and it's actually a little bit more like out to left field and the projections ran assuming that wind wasn't as much of a factor. All of a sudden you get this game environment where both teams benefit from the wind that like just shifted a little bit. So I do like that.
And it's like if like Garrett Cole's pitching, right? And it's in Cincinnati and wind's blowing out and it's like 90 degrees. It's like, okay, I don't want to attack Garrett Cole, but could he give him a bomb or two? Like maybe through the game stack, it's a good way to do it rather than doing a 2-man and then I don't have it paired up with that game. Well, if I'm betting on Garrett Cole to get rocked maybe in that stadium for a little bit, maybe I should have the whole game. So it's just an idea, right? And Garrett Cole is probably not the best example, but sometimes there's like these other pitchers that people just overvalue and it makes absolutely no sense. Like, I know Brady Singer was being overvalued on a slate recently, and I was like, guys, this is Brady Singer. What are we doing here? So, it's definitely that's how baseball can be sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you what, we're seeing 10% Texas stacks in our pool. It's definitely viable to take. I don't think it's wrong necessarily to look at the slate and say I'm gonna get some exposure there. I mean, we have 10% already in our pool here. Like even getting up to 20%, like. I don't hate that here, especially 5-game slate. I don't mind that angle there. So another thing of looking at that you can look at here is right. Sabersim's telling us, Rangers look like a better play than the White Sox. Talking about those 2 different stacks here, at least with the updated, the increased Shane projection here. So if you wanted to take one of those big stands against one of these top aces, the Sims say Rangers rather than White Sox. So interesting angle there too.
Cool. Well, I think that should wrap it up for us. Thanks a lot for joining. If you guys can hit that like out the door, we would appreciate it. And of course, we'll be back next week with some more Sabersim stuff. But we still got some shows for you today. 3 p.m. we got the NBA rundown. They'll be talking about all the craziness in the NBA playoffs. After that, 4:45, I'll be back with JT Hayes, Titletown. We'll be talking about this MLB slate. So be sure to check that out here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll get notified when we go live. So be sure to do that. But for me, Mangone and Jordan, we'll see you guys later.